Tried to convince him to lead a song. He says, I've already got him off the slate for the end of the service. Okay. It's a good start to stand up with Jesus. It's a blessing, a real blessing to know that not only can we stand with Jesus and that we stand together, but that the Son of God already stood and He stands for us. John chapter 9, probably one of my more favorite passages in the New Testament. A story about a man that was born blind. It was just another day for him. He found his way to wherever he goes, where he normally sits and begs. And yet he never expected what he was about to get. His greatest hope would have been maybe a little bit more than what he normally gets as he's begging out on the street corner. It would have been exciting for somebody to actually drop in something great in his hand and him to feel that and know there's something really precious. But he was not expecting Jesus to come along and heal him. God does amazing and great transformations in the lives of people. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. And in fact, it's very similar to a lesson I did in Nicaragua as I was going through the process of teaching down there. But this guy kept interrupting me. I think it was the translator, actually, as we were going back and forth. But I'm wanting to talk this morning about what great transformations God is able to do. And this man that was born blind wasn't expecting anything at all like this. But his world was turned upside down. As we look at the lesson here this morning, I want you to know, number one, God has the power to perform great transformations. Just look at Genesis chapter 1, when there was absolutely nothing that ever existed except God and the angels, and God said, let there be light. And there was light. Changing from complete darkness now to something transformed so immense, I can't imagine what that light might have been like. And there was light. And God caused that to happen. You can turn to the page of the New Testament. You can look at something like when Jesus came along and began to change lives and to heal people. And that was amazing to watch those transformations in the lives of people, like the man that was born blind, described in John chapter 9. But it blew even the disciples' minds when they got in a boat with Jesus and they headed out across the sea and the storms came up. And as the storms came upon them, they began to be so fearful that even the seasoned fishermen worried. They woke up Jesus. Imagine sleeping in that. But nonetheless, he slept through it and they woke him up. And they begged him to do something, but they weren't expecting even what he was capable of doing. And he stood up and he said, peace be still. And the wind stopped. The sea became calm. God is able to do amazing transformations. And I want us just to build that understanding in our mind before we even move to the next point of what God is able to do. He's able to cause abilities to take place in man that man doesn't even think about. When you look at the life of Moses, as God first of all began to call him in the book of Exodus in the Old Testament. And here God comes to Moses now, and Moses has spent 40 years in Pharaoh's court. He knows the power of Pharaoh, and he also knows the system. If there was ever a man that understood that, that was something great. But after that 40 years, he spent 40 more years out in the desert, now taking care of sheep. Quite a change for the man that was very possibly in charge of Pharaoh's next reign. And here he is, after the 40 more years, an old man. Might have thought himself to be a little bit decrepit, I don't know. And now God calls him. And he asks him to do something incredible. To go and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. Oh, Moses became kind of scared about the whole situation. Offered all kinds of excuses to God of how he's not eloquent, how he stutters, and on and on. And yet, that wasn't good enough for God. And God took this fumbling, misguided old person and made a powerful figure out of him. And because of what God was able to do, Moses caused some great things to happen. Or you can look at Peter, the man who thought he was the right guy for the job as being apostle. The man who was quite often the one who spoke first in answering questions for Jesus, or at least the New Testament seems to imply that. And yet when Peter finally got to the point of denying the Lord, he lost his confidence. He was no longer the guy that could get out of the boat and walk on the water. He was the guy that was going back and going fishing. His old job, as the Gospel of John concludes here in chapter 21. And so Peter's out fishing once again, and some of his apostles along with him, and it appears to me that he's given up the idea of being an apostle. And the Lord comes along and calls him again. Simon, do you love me more than these? Well, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Feed my sheep. And again, he asked him the same thing, and a third time until it just distraught Peter. But Peter needs to understand that God can cause changes to happen even when Satan's defeated him. And what he was able to do in so many different lives, as we read about in the Old Testament and the New Testament. We can look at the souls of individuals. Individuals like a man who was a persecutor of the church, known as Saul of Tarsus. A man of the tribe of Benjamin, a powerful figure, a Pharisee among the Pharisees, as he'll describe himself later in his pastime. And yet his heart has changed. His life is so different. The soul is turned around now. This individual is no longer a person to be reckoned with by the church, but rather someone that stands up for Jesus in every situation. Hearts were changed. I knew a fellow in Oak Ridge who, scientist by trade, quite an intellectual biologist, atheist. Wife was a faithful Christian. Occasionally he visited church. His name was Ed. Ed, why about a Bible study sometime? Sure, why not? He was into anything intellectual. So I'm headed off to go visit his house one evening for the first Bible study, traveling alongside a fellow who was riding in the car with me, and he said, "What are you going to talk about tonight?" I said, "We're going to read from the Bible." Ed's an atheist. That's not going to count for him. We're going to try it anyway. Never seemed to hurt before when I sat down and read with people. I know Ed's an atheist. We'll just see what we can do. And so we sat down that evening and we began reading. I said, let's talk about Jesus. We're going to read from the Gospel of Matthew. And so we began reading. And his questions each time would come up and say, how do I know that's true? After all, you're just reading from a book that you call the Bible, but I don't believe in God. Well, we'll keep reading. And we kept reading, and every week we'd go back and we'd keep reading. And a lot of times Ed would ask the question, how do I know that's true? I mean, how do I know that Jesus really existed? And how do I know that, you might use a little defense talking about Josephus, a historian who talked about the existence of Jesus. Okay, he could count that. But all these things that we're talking about that are coming from the Bible, he kept asking, how do I know that's true? We kept reading, and we kept going back. And somewhere in the process of time, his questions changed. And as we began to discuss Jesus and what he asked us to do for him, his questions now became, show me where it says that in the Bible. Do you see the change? God is able to change the hearts and even the souls of individuals. He's promised us salvation. He's promised us, according to the book of Isaiah, though our sins be as scarlet, he shall make them as white as snow. He's promised us in Romans chapter 6 that if we are buried with Christ in baptism, we can be raised to walk a new life, totally transformed from the old life. God is able to do those things. As powerful as he was in Genesis 1, he's able to do inside in the workings of individuals, in the hearts and the souls of man. So we ask ourselves, okay, I've made that transformation. I've made that commitment, you might say. I have been immersed into Christ. I've made that. Now, why don't I feel changed like that guy in chapter 9 of John that now I was blind, or I was blind, but now I see? Why don't I consider that kind of thing? Why don't I see great strides in my life if you're saying that God is able to do that? Well, two possible answers. Number one, and this could possibly be you, you actually haven't seen it happen. You know, in the process of time, however long it has been since you become a Christian, you might not have been measuring your growth along the way. I can remember the first day that I received the Bible when I was in my 20s. I can remember marking on the edge of the Bible because I found a passage I thought that was so neat. Matthew 7, verse 7. Ask and it shall be given to you, and seek and you shall find. Knock and it will be open. I thought it was the neatest passage ever, and I was afraid I'd never find it in that huge book again, so I marked it on the edge of the book so I could put my thumbnails and pull it open and find it again. And it's underlined still in my office there, in the first Bible I had. The next day I found more Bible verses. And wow, this is great, you know, and I knew this much or didn't know anything, and now I've got this much and then that much. And then afterwards, and then after a while, it felt like I wasn't really growing as much in comparison to what I felt like I was getting started with. I think back to a friend who was teaching Spanish in Guatemala as I was down there. And he said, today at the end of the class, you're going to learn this much Spanish. And tomorrow you're going to learn that much more. And you're going to be twice as proficient in Spanish as you were the day before. And after a week, you're going to learn this much. He said, but after a period of time, you're going to think you're not learning as much as you used to because you keep only adding this much in comparison to all that you've done. But keep at it because there are changes that do come along. We don't see our growth. Well, except maybe in Craig's son Harrison. You kind of watch him daily. He's growing and growing. But everybody else is pretty well normal. But every so often, and gentlemen and ladies, for most of us, we have to go in and get a haircut. You don't really actually see it grow, but there's a change taking place. And some of those that don't go in and get haircuts, we've seen some men like that have beards and hair and what have you. That might be their choice. We don't. There's something going on there. God happens to cause changes sometimes in your life and you don't see them taking place. They may not be always so dramatic and mind-shattering to cause something great at that moment. But he still can be making changes. Now that's one option. And it might be happening in your life. I know it's happening in some people here. I've watched the growth. And it's fantastic to watch an individual like Chad step up and read Scripture where he was scared to death to do something like that a short time ago. And when he first came here, Chad, can I pick on you just a second? He didn't even have a driver's license. But he was studying the Bible more than the driver's license. Now he's a Christian and we're seeing him grow. So there is growth going on. But maybe there's not in everybody. And let me tell you about the other side here, or what at least could be thwarting. And that is that we have barriers to those transformations. And you say, oh, well, Satan's out there working. Yeah, he is. And he's in there doing all that he can do to keep the transformations from happening. He has you on his list, and he's working down as best he can. Not going to let Darren grow today. We'll pick on people today. Not going to let Dennis grow today. I'm going to keep it down as best I can. Now, he's got your name. I don't have to call him. He knows you and he knows your struggles. But generally speaking, there are some things out there that we know that are barriers to transformation. Number one is pride itself. Pride is described all the way through the Old and the New Testament that works us over. Matter of fact, in Proverbs chapter 6, there's a list of 7 things that God hates. And at the very top of the list is a proud look. Proverbs 6, verses 16 and 17, I believe it is. It's not that we look good, but it's rather we act proud to God. I don't need you. A whole lot reminiscent of the Pharisees. Again, in John chapter 9, through watching this guy being transformed. And now he's confident, I was blind and now I see. And the Pharisees couldn't admit it. And Jesus says, because you claim you can see, you'll leave with your blindness. They were too proud to admit that they needed Jesus. The blind man knew it, even if he was blind. What a difference it made, but the pride kept the Pharisees, the religious leaders, from seeing who Jesus was and recognizing their need for him. There was no need to change. They were already great on their own. And so they never really transformed. Similar to that is denial. Right along with that. Again, these are man-made things. We do these. It's our own fault. The issue of pride. The idea of denial. I can look back to the Old Testament and I can see what's going on in the book of 1 Samuel. There's a man who was anointed of God. His name was Saul. He was king. He was head and shoulders above anybody as far as size was concerned. Powerful leader, great soldier, and God sends him out on this mission. And he says to him, now I want you to go, and he uses the phrase, utterly destroy everything. And Saul understood what that meant. That means you wipe out absolutely everything. If it's destroyable, you destroy it. If not, you burn it, you do whatever. You don't come back with any spoils. You don't bring back any gold. You don't bring back any prisoners or anything. Absolutely burn it all up. And so Samuel the prophet's going out to meet Saul as Saul is coming back from the victory. And Samuel, as he's listening to what's going on, is hearing sheep and cattle and all this in the background. Saul comes up to him, carrying Saul riding on his horse and feeling so proud he's won a victory. And he says, I have performed the Lord's commandment. 1 Samuel, chapter 15, chapter 16, verse 13. Total denial. I did what God told me, he says. And Samuel's response back to him, he says, what is the noise I hear in the background from the cattle and the sheep then? And what is this about a king that you're bringing back? And old Saul started with all these different excuses of why he did this. I just brought back for sacrifices, and the people made me do it. Throw in another one, that's always good. It's not me, it's everybody else's fault. And basically, it was denying the fact that he didn't do what God told him. Barriers to transformation. Denial. We're not talking about a river now off in another place in the world. Our denying that we've done anything wrong. Our denying that we're not where we ought to be. And it cost Saul his kingdom. The book of Hebrews discusses another thing here in chapter 2. Looking at verses 1 and 2, the Hebrew author says this, therefore we must give the more earnest heed to the things we've heard, lest we drift away. You know, it's so easy to come in and out of the door every Sunday, mark it off on our list. I've been there, heard the sermon, told the preacher it sounded good, busy with a couple people, and just let it escape right out of our minds. That lesson is a good lesson for her over here, for him over there. The Hebrew author says we ought to pay heed to the things that we've heard. Sometimes applying it is really hard. It always seems to fit somebody else's life. They need to hear that. Boy, stepped on their toes today. For if the word spoken through angels proved steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just reward, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? Sometimes our barriers, we're just not listening. We're here, but we're just not listening. For me, applying it to me. This guy right here came to my office one day. He said, David, you spend so much time reading, studying the Bible for all these lessons for everybody else. He says, how about you? And he turned and walked out. And looked up to see me. I said, I heard you, God. He's right. What about us? Sometimes I feel like he's an angel talking to me, sometimes it's otherwise, but that's the way life is. God uses people. Chapter 4, another of the barriers for our transformation, besides not paying attention. Verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering the rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed, the gospel was preached to us as well as to them, but the word which they heard did not profit them. Why? Not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. Well, I'm hearing what God's saying here, and I know it's right, and these, yeah, but, and we've got this list of reasons of why it can't help me. As if to say, God can fix a lot of things out there, He just can't fix my problems. Where's your faith? The word didn't profit them because they didn't mix it with faith. I want to stop and think that if God says He did it here, then He can do it here too. I want to be convinced, not just subtly convinced, but totally convinced that God is able to perform transformations in my life. And I want you to see that. And when we can grab a hold of that concept, the barrier will go away. We will start looking for opportunities of what God can do for us. You see, we're the barriers. The pride, the denial, the lack of applying the Scripture, or the lack of adding faith to it. One more we could add to that. Laziness. Matthew chapter 25, Jesus tells a parable. His parable is about just people in general having different talents. But the parable is described like this. As this master, he gives out certain sums of money to people, each according to his own ability. But this one guy over here, he didn't get too much because he didn't have a lot of ability. So you don't give him a lot of responsibility. But the guy didn't do anything with what he had. And when the master comes back, as Jesus is telling the parable, he looks at him and he says, "You wicked and lazy servant." Sometimes we just don't want it. What if Jesus said, I don't want to go here. I don't want to fool with these apostles. They're all backbiting and arguing with one another. I don't want to hang out with these Pharisees. I don't want to talk to these people. I don't want to go down to the earth when there's no air conditioning. Send me down in 2000 instead of the year 0. I don't want to go to the cross. I don't want to deal with these people's issues. I don't deserve this. We have a very fervent, compassionate Master and Lord and Savior that did what He was to do, never was lazy. Barriers to transformation. Now here's the good news out of all of this. It can be overcome. Did you hear me? It can be overcome in your life. There are two very, I guess you could say, creepy figures that stick in my mind. One of them lives here in Chattanooga. I saw him the other day. He's a twin to the guy in Grenada, Nicaragua that I talked about down there. Hair all matted and beat down. It literally looks like he's not had a bath in years. If he had, it's just because he stood out in the rain. He walks with his head down, one outside here, and if you try to catch eye contact, he will look and keep right on going. Rick's tried to even talk to him a few times out here on the street. He won't talk to you. You can say hi to him, and I've tried. He won't talk to you. The other guy out in Grenada, as I was preparing for this lesson, I used to see him every morning. I'd get up early in the morning, and I would jog, and I'd head straight down this little walk street toward the lake and jog around. And either going or coming, I ran across this same guy, same vision, same type of person, and I kept thinking, I wish I could do something for him. And then I talked about it during the lessons. I was talking about transformation. And I talked about how God would like to do for us what I want to do with that guy. I'd like to take that guy, take him to the hotel, and just put him underneath the shower and just turn the water on, hang him a bar soap and say, here, try this out. See if it doesn't feel good. And then take time and cut his hair and trim him up and then put on some clean clothes if he hadn't had it in years. And say, now look in the mirror and see what you look like and see if you don't feel different. That is what God wants to do to us. He wants to wash us clean. He wants to make us so different, put us up in front and say, this is what I really want you to be like. And I wanted so bad to do that with that guy in Nicaragua. And the last day that we were there and I was taking off and doing my little jog and all, I looked for him. I thought, I preached about it. I'm going to at least try to approach this guy today. And I went out and I came almost all the way back to the hotel and I was crossing through the park and I didn't see him. Looked at my watch and I thought, well, do a couple more minutes here. And I circled around the backside of the cathedral and I came up and there he was laying on the ground. I thought, there he is. Opportunity, okay? Preacher. Do it. Okay, step one. Ran back to the hotel. Got all leftover snacky stuff that I didn't eat. It was quite a bag full. And went over and I thought, this will do it. Walked up to him. He's laying there on the ground next to the cathedral. And I said, "Tenés hambre? You hungry? See?" Handed to him. Gracias. Opened up, started eating. I'd had a bottle of water. I gave it to him. I looked at him. Before I thought he was about my size, and I'll just give him a set of clothes. But as I was looking at him, I thought, that guy's skinnier than I ever could have imagined. But he could wear a shirt at least. And I said, would you like to have a new shirt? See? Okay. Jogged back over, came back over, had it rolled up. I thought, this is going to look good because on the back of it, big scripture verse on it. I thought, this guy's going to look different wearing this thing around or not. And they've seen that shirt before on me because I've worn it several trips now. Like a shirt? Yeah. Handed to him. And then I said, what's your name? He looked up at me and smiled. That's it. Switched off. I'm not talking to you. That's all I could do. God has limits on what he can do for us. But he can change us if we're willing to talk. If we're just letting in. You see, we're the barrier. Romans 1:16 talks about the power that's in the gospel for changing people. Chad read earlier about from Romans 12 that God is asking us and begging us through the letter of Paul now to remember who we are, to be transformed, not conformed to the world, but transformed by the renewing of our mind, letting the Scripture all penetrate. We look back to an Old Testament situation where there was a guy who Moses was sent to, we talked about earlier. He was Pharaoh. In Exodus chapter 4, all the way up to chapter 14, there are 18 times mentioned in there by God about Pharaoh and his hard heart. He wouldn't listen. And he lost absolutely everything. God's bidding us to offer him a different heart. He uses the terms in Proverbs 3 verse 5 like this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. In Psalm 51 verse 17 he says the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. These, O Lord, you will not despise. God's looking to get into our heart. He appeals to the Hebrew author in other places in the New Testament. Don't harden your heart as they did back in the days of the rebellion, talking about the Old Testament situation. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Jesus also says in Matthew 22, verse 37, love the Lord your God with all your heart. Proverbs 4:23 says basically it's this. Keep or guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life. You recognize your weakness. You let God in. You forget the pride. Don't deny that you need it. Recognize the need to feed it, to add faith to it. Allow those changes to happen. Take the barriers out, let God in, and transformation can take place. We just have to be willing. I'm looking down at that guy in my mind. After I asked him if he wanted a shirt, he said yes. And I said, "What's your name?" And he shook his head. No. That's how we are with God. We're ready to take in some things, and God says, "Let me change you." No. That's far enough. I live the way I want to. Basically what this guy was saying. I'll choose the street life. I'll keep on wearing what I wear, if that's what it is. If you really believe there's a God, then believe He can change. And He can do powerful things in your life. Then let Him in. Don't look at anybody else. Just look inside. We sing a song to encourage you if you need to come. Be baptized or come back. Or if you just need to pray.